The BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, has stated that ISO 222 can be adopted as standardized messaging protocol, of course, for what? Well, basically for digital asset transactions. On top of that, the SWIFT website has updated itself once again in regard to this big mandate coming out here soon. This is definitely one you're going to want to consider sticking to the end of the outline for you can not miss any of the key things. But whatever the case be, consider smashing that like if you haven't done so already. Let's get into why you're here and why you're paying attention to some of these findings in regard to the research. Before we jump further into it, I want to state this. Jesse brings straight up alpha on his channel on a consistent basis. If you're following me, definitely give him a follow over on his YouTube, which is Apex Crypto Consulting NFA. We're going to share some things with you and why it matters.
If managing your crypto feels like solving a puzzle, it's time to switch to Decent Wallet. So just a few taps, you can manage, track, and secure your crypto with unmatched ease. And here's the best part. Grab your Decent Wallet at a discounted price by using the referral link below. Don't miss out on making your crypto experience smoother and more secure.
We're going to jump into what we have, and it's from Smoke, believe it or not. You're like, believe it or not, it's always from Smoke. Well, he makes life so easy, so of course it's from Smoke. Let's jump into it. Smoke has this, and he gets really into it. Again, the intro, what we just stated. So, ISO 222 can be adopted to standardize messaging and, of course, for digital asset transactions. You see on the list XRP, XLM, XDC. Again, the X's, Algorand, Hedera hbar, QNT, and even Cardano's ADA. He says it's fully documented. Well, let's just see if it really is. So for one, in the case study, you see about key things about the observations, interoperability, SWIFT-MT versus ISO 222. Again, SWIFT-MT coexistence ends at the end of November 2025, November 22nd. We go from MT to MX. In the highlight on the bottom left, what do you see? ISO 222 can be adopted as standardized messaging protocols for digital asset transactions. That's a big deal moving forward. And as we jump more into it, well, we said there's an update from SWIFT. In the update from SWIFT.com, it says, with the November 2025 deadline for payment instructions drawing closer, JPMorgan Payments share insights from their ISO 222 adoption journey and lessons that may help the community. And like it mentions, JPMorgan Payments, combines treasury services, trade, and working capital, and card and merchant services capabilities to help clients pay their customers or employees in different currencies around the world. It processes nearly 10 trillion in payments daily. My goodness. Operating in over 160 countries and 120 currencies. Well, we talk about early adoption. Well, for you and many others who came in early for these particular digital assets, you can kind of have an idea why they play an important role. For one, JPMorgan was committed to being an early adopter of ISO 222. So, checkmark. And currently accounts for about 30% of the total ISO 222 cross-border payment message traffic on, of course, their network. I mean, say what you want. I think SWIFT plays a large role with this, but we know that SWIFT, of course, has the whole thing with Chainlink, and they get their honorable flowers, but again, some of the other ones that play a key role with it all. I'll read this quote. We'll jump over to another part of the research, and it is this. It's the rationale behind their decision. Quote, there are several reasons why we went live with ISO 222 with the adoption of CBPR+. Firstly, we felt it would reduce the risk of truncation during the period where MT and MX coexist with one another. I mean, I've stated this numerous times, that truncation. You got to have things that won't truncate. I've used log files numerous times, whether it's game servers and so on. At the end of the day, you don't want to have an issue of truncation because things will get lost in the translation and they get garbled up. You don't want one central bank, for example, the Bank of Venezuela having to contact the Bank of South Korea and saying, hey, what's the delay? Because in that delay, time is money and there will be tremendous fees. We do know that. And we did have an example from 2022 about how it was $10 trillion between one particular country borrowing from another, and they get hit with $60 billion in those SWIFT MT fees. MX will change everything moving forward. Now, just a tad bit more about this. So we pull up into why you're here. It's the whole thing of, like it says, market leaders in clearing. We want to set the standard and and be there to support our clients during the ISO 2022 migrations. All right, so is JPMorgan really here? Well, the answer is yes. And look what it says in the documentation from Global Market Strategy. It says specifically, we are bullish on digital assets into 2025. We're in 2025. That's a big deal. And again, this from Smoke. JPMorgan is actively releasing projections on the anticipated capital inflows and XRP ETP could attract once it secures trading approval. Again, exchange traded product, not exchange traded fund. They call it sizing up the XRP ETP opportunity. That's a big deal. And as you see here in the example from Smoke, well, they literally call that sizing Solana and XRP ETP opportunity. That is major. That's why we get into some of these key things. And that's why, of course, we share it with you. Again, it is actually documented, and that's a major, major deal. Before we wrap it up with the last bit of findings in regard to JP Morgan and why it all matters to you, some key thoughts in regards to all of this. Jesse.
Hey guys, hope all is well. Yeah, so the BIS is saying that ISO 20022 can be adopted for digital asset transfers. Oh my goodness, they're bad. They're so bad, as if, right? So the ISO messaging standard, I believe, they started working on that. I believe it's like 2004. I think they started working on that. And the goal of that, the reason for that is so that they can do instant payments, instant settlement, use digital assets. That's the purpose of ISO, right? Like, and Ripple company started, like, I think it's 2004 as well, right? It was called OpenCoin, I think. So I mean, this has been planned for years, and that is the reason for the ISO standard, because you can have distributed ledger technology be capable of settling transactions instantly and get all these benefits from that. But if the messaging is not standardized, you don't get the benefits. You can't tap into the full benefits of the XRP ledger, for example. And the XRP, like I've said before, XRP Ripple is the only, I believe it's the only blockchain company that's sitting on the steering committee of the ISO. So it's been planned for years. So, but now the BIS, of course, they're always telling you something 15 years after, right? So, oh, they could, we could adopt it for digital assets. Oh my goodness, it's the whole reason it was created, right? Anyways, end of rant for now. So JP Morgan, 10 trillion. Yeah. So I don't know if you remember, if you've seen this video here, Gary Gensler, when he was this geyser, when he was giving the speech at MIT, was giving the lecture, the course, he said that right now there's a few different corresponding banks. The big ones are controlling all of the international transfers, right, that go through SWIFT. And JP Morgan's one of them. And in his lecture, he said, like, they're controlling everything. And he says, like, if you had a company that had a solution that could seamlessly do instant cross-border transfers and be away with this correspondent banking system, like it would eliminate the need for correspondent banking, you would have to, and he was talking about Ripple, and he said, like, you could get them to budge and not block you if you gave them, let's say you had a digital asset, maybe you give them about 50% of your supply or 80% of your supply to incentivize them, so that you can take over. So he basically, what he was saying, I'm probably not explaining the best, but basically what he was saying is, he didn't say Ripple, but he was referring to Ripple. So Ripple could use some of the XRPs they have and give them to these major corresponding banks that control about 90% of the transfers, like JP Morgan. They control 30. I think there's like 5 or 6, four banks. I think they control like pretty much 90 or 100% of the corresponding transfers, I think, international transfers. So that's what he was saying. But he didn't say Ripple, but he's talking how, you can incentivize them by giving a whole bunch of. So definitely Ripple, some of that XRP in the escrow, and some of them that they might have released already, definitely that's for the big banks to get them on. And that's for SWIFT and central banks and IMF, and well, actually, it's XRP is the special drawing rights of the IMF. Actually, I'm gonna do a video on that. I did a video on that, but my audio was terrible. It was one of my first videos, and yeah, so I said IMF, but I had to say it. Like technically the XRP is the special drawing rights of the IMF. That's what it is. It's the new special drawing rights of the IMF. I've got a video coming out. I'm gonna redo the video. It's probably gonna be the most. I literally cracked the code on what XRP is and what Ripple, the company, really is. I literally cracked the code after 7 years of research. This is going to be the most significant video. This video is going to be insane. It's going to be insane. I know it doesn't sound very humble. I hate to say it, but this video, I literally cracked the code.
Well, we're all looking forward to that video. I've
Thank
done
you.
a few things on the IMF myself, and of course, Jesse and I are looking to do some updated collaborations about specifically XRP and the IMF. We're just going to have to take the time to really get into some of the nitty-gritty about that. So be out on the lookout, not only for his big video, but some collaborations that we're going to have for you guys, which is going to be really neat. Listen, we want to connect the last bit of this for you guys. I think you're really going to appreciate it. So again, let's just pull this up for you you can see it. So the other thing that we're going to jump into, other than Swift, is the next thing about what we have. And again, shout out to Smoke once again. He always brings the receipts. So let's pull this up. And as you see here, Smoke really gets into it. He says, remember, JPMorgan foresees decreased use of Tether with upcoming stablecoin regulations. This is where a lot of people have pointed out the whole notion that if this happens, this will create that much more supply and demand for things like your RLUSD, obviously USDC. In the research I've done with, for example, Rue Black, we pointed out that USDC is basically 23% of the overall stablecoin market. Like, we were not going to dismiss that either. But RLUSD does not have that market cap that USDC has yet. Again, key thing here is yet. I always want to point this out for you guys in the community that are new to this, and that is when we talk about Tether, while there's so much focus on the whole notion that, yeah, Ripple's trying to buy USDC, and apparently their offers, they haven't gone through. Keep in mind what happens if it does go through, because moving forward, what I want to point out is if that was to happen, again, very speculative, right? I think Tether could eventually happen too. And for the reason of this, a lot of people feel as though that Tether is the next black swan event. They've been talking about this for years, right? Even last bull market, I remember a lot of people talking about this, and even into the bear market, still people talking about it. They're still talking about it now, right? So the way I look at it is, if you were to be acquired by, for example, Ripple, talking about Tether, by the way, and I know it's going to take a heck of a lot of money for that to happen, not currently, but in the future, way down the road. Well, to me, it says, guess what, Tether? You can be in all 100% compliance because of MiCA, right? And moving forward, it seems as though that needs to be a thing that is not only addressed, but gets done. All right, getting back into this and why it matters to you, let's point this out. And that is the whole thing that we see what's already been confirmed, and that U.S. stablecoin regulations will specifically exclude Tether. Again, exclude them. So what I just basically mentioned does hold weight with the possibilities. Yes, it's speculative, but again, a lot of things that were speculative have come into fruition. This goes deep. He gets deep with it. We're going to get deep with it as well. Let's pull this up on your screen. JPMorgan foresees it all, but upcoming stablecoin regulations in the U.S. and Europe will impact Tether's usage, according to JPMorgan analysts. Again, this would likely put indirect pressure on Tether as its attractiveness would diminish. I'll say that again, diminish. This is where people feel as though that the utility run is imminent, because when you hear things like this, I'm not a fortune teller, but I can do research just as much as the next guy. So would diminish relative to stablecoins with more transparency and greater compliance with new regulatory KYC AML standards. This is where people get really afraid, and I'm not trying to scare you guys about the whole thing of what's going to happen to BTC, because again, all of that volume is dominated by a Tether pairing. And of course, Tether is paired up with so many things, right? Well, even on my BTCC thing, again, get yourself $10 free in Tether, but swap that, right? Swap it to something else. This challenge for Tether would also apply to the DeFi space, where Tether is widely used, again, like I just mentioned, as a source of collateral and liquidity. Quote, Tether reports are still lacking a full and detailed asset breakdown and independent audits instead of auditors' assurances. I will state this. I think it's a matter of time, maybe even Gilbert Verdient and Quant get involved with this, because they can solve the Tether problem through what? Authorize. That's a story for another day. Bottom part, there's significant price risk associated with assets other than UST bills. Wow. Getting further into this and why it matters to you, jumping back to Smoke. Let's pull this up as well on the other page. From the citation of signum.com. Verify it for yourself if you choose to do so. We see here a new stablecoin bill introduced to the United States Senate back in April would encourage U.S. banks to issue stablecoins and disadvantage non-bank stablecoin issuers and non-U.S. entities such as Tether. Who keeps going after this and doesn't want any of it? Elizabeth Warren. We'll leave it at that. Next thing we're going to pull up is also this from Smoke. And of course, it's a citation, because what you see here is what happened then. It was breaking back in February, not breaking now, but JPMorgan says Tether may need to sell BTC to comply with proposed U.S. stablecoin rules. Is this the next big, massive dump that's going to happen when everything's kind of going bullish? I don't know, but this has been a threat that's been looming for quite some time for all of us who are paying close attention to it all. Before I kick it back over to Jesse, I want to point this out as well from Smoke, doing it big. JP Morgan considers Ripple a, quote, heavyweight in the age of CBDCs, checkmark. And as you see from the citation on the cell phone, jpmorgan.com, well, it's money reimagined. And like it says here, let's pull this up. Money reimagined. Elsewhere on the agenda, the heavyweights from Ripple, MTech, and Deloitte share their perspectives on how money can be reimagined in the age, of course, of CBDCs. Because again, when you get further more into the documentation, as pointed out from Smoke, JP Morgan documentation on banks' involvement in blockchain acknowledges Ripple's potential to disrupt cross-border payments globally. Major nod to Ripple from the world's largest bank, checkmark. But more importantly, note the text at the bottom of the document. This document is being provided for the exclusive use of Mikhail Turklakov at Sberbank of Russia. In the exclusive, we see the document was crafted specifically to prevent relevant initiatives in blockchain to the largest commercial bank in Russia, while citing Ripple as a prominent example. So we have Russia plus JP Morgan plus Ripple, plans on plans hitting the bullseye. Let's pull this up for a brief moment before, again, we kick it back over to Jesse. And what do we see here? We see the citation. It says right here, in this section, we discuss areas with banking that could see significant change as a result of initiatives around the blockchain applications, and look at the case of Ripple, which has the potential to disrupt cross-border payments processing across the country industry globally. And as we also see on the bottom, the document is being provided for the exclusive use of Mikhail Turkolov, again, what was pointed out was Sberbank of Russia. That is so major when you look further into it all. This is why we point out these key things. And again, with that said, your thoughts, Jesse.
It's always the same thing, right? So JP Morgan says that Ripple could disrupt cross-border payments. So 6 years ago, CEO Brad Garlinghouse admitted that RippleNet had 200 banks connected. Okay, this is 7 years ago. Sorry, they had 200 banks connected to RippleNet, and they were adding 5 banks per week. And then they said, "Oh, now we're adding 6 banks per week." This is 7 years ago. Okay, and then they stopped talking about it. They never talked about that again. So 7 years ago, they were connecting 6 banks per week. Okay, so that is 300 banks per year. That's 7 years ago. That's 2,100 banks at that rate. That doesn't count. That doesn't account for SWIFT and ACH and all these different payment networks that they're connecting into RippleNet, right? So just alone, bank per bank, 6 per week. 7 years ago, that's 2,100 banks they would have connected by now at that rate. Okay. And they already had 200 connected. So that would be like 2,300, for example. Right. And then we have the documents that we showed. I think I showed many times on my videos. I don't know if we showed them here. Hyperledger Foundation showing that literally XRPs, the internet value. You see the CBDC platforms being built on private chains, private ledgers of the XRP ledger. I talk about that in my videos. I show everything. I go really in depth there. And so now JP Morgan is saying that, Ripple could disrupt for cross-border payment. What do you mean? They took over 6 years ago. It's unreal. Could disrupt. It's more than cross-border, right? It's about FX. It's they use the word cross-border, but that's they're downplaying it. When they say cross-border, they mean going from one cryptocurrency to another, or one asset type to another type of asset. Anything to anything, any type of value, any type of asset to any type of asset. So it's that FX. They're taking over the FX market, the foreign exchange, plus everything else that's going to be tokenized. They're going to be that bridge, that liquidity asset. The documents from the Hyperledger Foundation, where they're building the internet value, it says that Ripple is going to be the global liquidity marketplace and the global real-time gross settlement system. So that is the global RTGS. That means it's the global real-time settlements for all the central banks. All the central banks in the world have their RTGS, but this document is showing Ripple being the global RTGS. Plus, it's the global liquidity marketplace. So it's more than just disrupting cross-border, and it's more than just could disrupt, right? So it's unreal. In regards to Tether, I don't know, man. Like, in regards to Tether, obviously I can't prove this. I'm not sure about this, but I'm thinking that is likely a government operation. I'm thinking the 3-letter agencies are probably involved in Tether. Again, I haven't done deep research on that, so I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised because they are literally inflating they're pumping the markets by pumping Bitcoin, pumping everything else. They're literally pumping the crypto markets, and this has been going on for a while. So I'm thinking the 3-letter agencies are probably, when I say I'm talking about the intelligence agencies, I'm thinking they might be involved in that, because technically they're creating US dollars, right? By creating this money that's not necessarily backed 100%. So I mean, it's not worse than the Federal Reserve. If they print money out of thin air, it's not backed by anything. So I'm thinking it might be a government op, and then maybe they would slowly step away from that, and maybe USDC starts taking the volume. But it's not. I don't think it's not like they're going to pull the plug and it's going to go to zero. I mean, I don't buy that. I think, hope I'm wrong, but I think that's just that's just a scare tactic. That's another, like, making the retailers hesitant on, what if Tether goes. I don't think they would just pull the plug like that. It would, in theory, I think it should affect the market too much. So that's kind of my thinking on that. If USDT is gonna lose its position and come down, I think it would be slowly, so that USDC or RL USD, the Ripple USD is gonna take over, or maybe Ripple buys it because Ripple's taking over the world. So maybe that was the plan the whole time. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities, and it's of course great to reference all of it with the what ifs and whatnot. I always shake my head when people say like they're rooting for, uh, literally for Tether to be exposed, for it can crash the whole market. Like, really?
It's
Why
crazy.
would you? No, you don't want to root for that. We're
No.
talking about seeing people having like their portfolios just been going to, I guess you could say, zero. Why would anybody want to root for that? But there are people that do that. But whatever the case be, we're glad to give you guys this perspective and share some of these key things. I think it's clear when we look into the documents, whether it's from the BIS or site JP Morgan, that anything that's tied to ISO 222, your XRP, your XLMs, your
Mm,
XDCs, your QNTs, your algos,
yeah.
you name it, play a significant role moving forward. Absolutely, plain
Yeah.
as day.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
ladies and gentlemen, do us a solid if you listen to the entire outline and simply type this key 3 letters into the comments, and it's a simple, easy one, and that is ISO. And we know or will know that you listen to the entire outline. On behalf of myself and Jesse over at Apex Crypto Consulting NFA, know what you have, know why you hold it. The research trumps FUD 110%, and be out on the lookout for this video that he's going to be coming out with hopefully pretty soon. No pressure.
Thanks, man.
No
Appreciate
problem.
it. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you on the next one.
See you guys.